Всем привет, друзья! Меня зовут Кристиан Басар, и вы слушаете моего подкаста Historical Thoughts and Interpretations. Hello everybody, this is Christian Basar again with another episode of Historical Thoughts and Interpretations podcast. So that was a Russian introduction, basically, well, introducing myself. So today is going to be something a little bit different on this episode. So this is going to be an announcement of a planned series of podcast episodes. So the episodes will be about Russian cities to which I have been. So we'll go over a little bit of that in a minute. So I just want to give like a little introduction to the series, the plan for it, timetables, and everything. But first, I would like to give you a quick little message. Hello, listeners. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast, and I sure hope that you've been enjoying the thoughts given in the Historical Thoughts and Interpretations episodes. But I would like to ask if you would consider making a pledge to the podcast via Patreon. I have many projects in mind for this podcast, and the books, paper, and so on needed to produce the episodes will not be free. Help keep Historical Thoughts flowing so that we can interpret the past and learn from it. You may pledge any amount that you like, and whatever you choose to give will be appreciated. If you would like to donate, go to my Patreon link at patron.podbean.com/historicalthoughts. And again, that's patron.podbean/historicalthoughts. Now, let's get back to the episode. So again, this is an announcement for a planned podcast episode series. So, as you know, that a lot of the episodes that I deal with focus on Russian history. And I have, in fact, been to Russia twice, once in 2016 and once in 2018. So the first time I went to Karelia and St. Petersburg for about 3 weeks, and also in 2018, I went for the World Cup competition of soccer, which took place in Russia, and you were allowed to travel there for visa-free for about a month and a half. And so, in total, between 2016 and 2018, I have visited 10 Russian cities. And so, what I plan to do for this podcast series is go over the history of each of those cities. So the cities are going to be done in alphabetical order. So we're going to first go with, the first city will be Kazan, second will be Kirov, Moscow, Penza, Petrozavodsk, St. Petersburg, Saransk, Tambov, Ufa, and Volgograd. So just a quick little note on each of those cities. So the first one, Kazan, it was the capital of the Kazan Khanate until the Muscovite conquest under Ivan the Terrible in 1552. And nowadays, it is the modern capital of the Republic of Tatarstan. The second city, Kirov, it's formerly known by two names, Klinova and Vyatka. So when it was known as Klinova, it was a Novgorodian colony from the 12th century. Then it was eventually named after Sergei Kirov, the head of the Communist Party in St. Petersburg, who was assassinated, and Stalin used that as a precedent as a justification for increased repression. And third city is Moscow, of course, the city that came to dominate Russian principalities in the 15th, 16th centuries. And of course, now it is the capital of the former Soviet Union and the modern Russian Federation. And perhaps it's the most famous touristy place in Russia. And St. Basil's Cathedral is there, Red Square is there, but there are other places that you might not recognize right away, or not everybody may know right away, for example, the Государственный универмаг, or GUM in both the Russian and in English acronyms. So it's a big shopping center. And there are lots of many different museums in Moscow, and some pretty scenic sites as well. And the fourth city, Penza, it's a Russian fortress city founded in 1663. And fortress cities like this become more common as you go south from Moscow, as this is where Muscovy, or Russia, was constantly trying to consolidate control against Tatar raiding parties by building defensive forts and defensive lines. So that's the fourth city we'll go into. Petrozavodsk is in northern Russia, in Karelia, on the border with Finland. And so Petrozavodsk was founded in 1703, the same year as St. Petersburg. And this city was founded when Peter the Great needed an iron foundry. And in fact, the name Petrozavodsk translates to Peter's factory or Peter's foundry. And of course, the sixth city will be St. Petersburg, the second capital, so to speak, of Russia. And it was actually, in fact, the Russian Empire's capital from the 18th century until 1918. This was when the Bolshevik Communists had taken power, shortly after the Bolshevik Communists had taken power, and then moved it to Moscow. And St. Petersburg can be seen as sort of Russia's cultural capital. It's more Western, and there are lots of museums, tourist sites, and lots to see there. The next city is Saransk, and like Penza, this was a fortress founded in southwest Russia, and it was founded in the 1640s as part of the Saransk defensive line. Tambov, yet another fortress in Russia's southwest, this one founded in April 1636. It's in an agriculturally rich area, and there's a big legend behind the name. And so Tambov, the legend behind the name, comes from when Tatars were supposedly defeated there, and they said Tambov, or Tambov, which translates as, there's a god there. A god defeated us over there. And also in the Tambov region, a lot has happened there during the Russian Civil War, including a faction of peasants, known as the Greens, that fought against the Communists, or the Reds. And the ninth city, Ufa, it was annexed by Muscovy in 1557, just 5 years after the conquest of Kazan, a little bit further to the west. A fortress was built at Ufa 17 years later, and nowadays it is the capital of the modern Bashkortostan Republic. And finally, the 10th city, Volgograd, ending on a bit of a bang there. So Volgograd is, of course, the site of the Battle of Stalingrad in World War II from 1942 to 1943. It's also formerly named Tsaritsyn, where Joseph Stalin had become famous during the fighting of the Russian Civil War. But by far, the World War II battle is by far the most famous event that took place in that city. So that's the list of cities: Kazan, Kirov, Moscow, Penza, Petrozavodsk, and the rest of the 10. So I'm just going to go over now how I want to plan this series. So there's going to be a number of episodes, and I'll explain exactly how they're going to be broken up. But first, I want to do a first episode to kind of kick off the series, to explain some of the geography of the cities I went to, and explain some certain political concepts, such as, for example, Russia's federal political system. So I mentioned Kazan, and it's the capital of the Republic of Tatarstan. So you're thinking, you might be thinking about, okay, so there's the country of Russia, but there's a republic within it. So what exactly is that? I want to go into that, because Russia's federal system has territories within it known as republics, but there are other ones called oblasts. And so it's sort of somewhat like how in Canada and in the United States you have states or provinces, and you also have territories as well underneath the federal government in Ottawa or Washington. So in Russia you have a similar thing. You have the federal government in Moscow, and then you have local, regional governments in the republic or the oblast. And republics and oblasts have different rights, certain different powers that they can use within the political system. So I want to go a little bit over that, so that when you hear Bashkortostan Republic in the episodes, and then you hear Kirov Oblast, you'll know a bit better the difference between those. So in the first so what's next going to happen is that each city is going to have its own little sort of mini series within the main series. So the first episode for each city, I want to talk about that city's founding year, what federal subject it's part of, its population, economies and industries, and any interesting facts that I may come across in that city, and also my thoughts about those cities as well, what I liked, what I didn't like, the sites and museums and everything that struck me, particularly when I visited that city. So then we start with the second episode of kind of the more detailed look at the history. So look a little bit at the pre-founding era in that city's area, and then talk about the founding and go over the reasons why. For example, was it a fort or a trading area? Which ethnic groups were there at the time? and the circumstances around that construction. And then it goes going by after, so I'd like to split it up by eras. So there will be some main eras that will be common to most of the episodes. So, for example, the Golden Horde period, when the sort of a Mongol successor state had control over the Russian principalities. And then Muscovite period around when modern day Moscow was starting to grow and really starting to flex its muscles and take over territories around it. This would be about after 1480. And then the Tsarist period, after the Romanov dynasty was installed in Moscow. And then the Imperial period, Peter the Great on, World War I, Revolution, Civil War, World War II, or the Great Patriotic War, and then also going past post-World War II, and up to around the Soviet Union's collapse. And then, of course, touch on some of the events of the modern period. And also, there may be a supplementary episode for some places of nearby sites. So, for example, Petrozavodsk, where I was, I also had a little trip. It was about an hour away from the city itself to the Kivach waterfalls, and where Peter the Great had actually created a health spa back in the 18th century. And also, in addition to being at Kazan, I also went on Svyezhsk Island, which had been established as a fortification before the final conquest of Kazan in 1552. So I'd like to dedicate a special episode to that island. And so the breakup of the episodes for each city will be a little bit different. Simply because different cities had different histories. For example, Penza and St. Petersburg did not exist in the medieval or the Golden Horde period, right? So, and World War II brings us a different situation altogether. Some cities like Kirov, Ufa, and Kazan did not see combat at all during the war, but Volgograd was the site of the Battle of Stalingrad, and Leningrad St. Petersburg was under siege for a few years. And also Moscow was also under great threat as well in 1941. So the breakups of all of those will be a little bit different. Some events will be more significant than others. And major cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg, there's so much that could be covered with those cities. So I'll have to be a little judicious on what I cover and concentrate on. And so I want to concentrate on especially important or interesting events. And but also there will be other concepts that are common between cities. For example, Ufa and Kazan, these are Muslim centers within Russia. So making them unique among the other cities that I visited, which were not so heavy Muslim centers. So that might deserve a separate episode, just talking a little bit about Islam in the Bashkir and the Tatar regions in Russia. So we'll see how that goes, but that might be something that I might do. So the plan for this, I hope to finish, as far as timetables, I hope to finish a city every 3 months. Do the research for each city, do the outlines and the scripts and everything, and the final recording and everything. So I've started already on the first city, so Kazan. I've started the research on that. But just please keep in mind and please be patient, because this is a very long-term project. Because if I'm aiming for to finish a city miniseries every 3 months, including the research and everything like that, this is going to be a very long-term project with 10 cities. But that's my goal. Finish a city every 3 months and get those episodes out for you guys. And also, this won't completely take up all my time with the podcast. There are also other podcast episodes I do want to do in the meantime. So that's the plan. So I'm really excited about this project. It'll help us learn a bit more about not just history of Russia, but history of individual cities. So I'm really excited about doing that project. So again, that's it for the introduction. So fairly soon I want to do that introductory episode talking about the geography and the Russia's federal system and those kinds of things that will be relevant for the as a starting point of that series. So I hope you guys all enjoyed this, and до свидания, спасибо большое. for listening, and please feel free to leave a pledge on Patreon to help support this podcast, because there will be a lot of books needed for this project, and also paper to print out outlines and everything. So so this podcast is fun to work on, but it's not free to work on either. Exactly. So any pledge amount that you would like to give would be very much appreciated. And I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this announcement episode, and keep thinking and have a great one.